LSU-Bama is upon us. We've got your final score predictions. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. We are free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. And remember, the fastest way to help us grow is by commenting below. So please leave your comments. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We will have your LSU-Alabama predictions, not only from me, but from Stanford Steve of College Game Day. You'll hear it here first. Lee Sterling of Paramount Sports, Professional Sports Better, will be here to give his pick. What does Alabama need to do to beat LSU? Pat Smith from WJOX in Birmingham lets you know exactly, but we will begin with what Brian Kelly had to say. So Thursday night was Brian Kelly's final media availability. And let's be very honest. Coming off the Texas A&M loss, there are two things that we all know LSU has got to do better. Two things in particular LSU must improve from that Texas A&M game in order to beat Alabama. They must stop a running quarterback, and you better be better on special teams. Let's start with how they slow down Jalen Milroe. Brian Kelly's been asked about it a million times this week. Here's the latest.
Certainly part of the whole defensive scheme is, when the play breaks down or Milroe gets outside the pocket, you got to lock on, right? There are no zones anymore. You got to find a guy that's in your area, and you got to lock down. But I think it starts with a disciplined pass rush. It starts with lanes. It starts with contain. And so I think it starts up front, and it works its way back. So all these levels of defense, defensive line, linebackers, everybody, all 11 have to be part of this. And I think it really, for us, where we broke down last year was in lanes and pass rush lanes. We worked really hard on that, and as well as making sure that we don't lose anybody on the back end.
When you look at Jalen Milroe this year, it's very easy. Alabama has had its best success when Jalen Milroe is at his best. I get it. He's the quarterback. It's a quarterback-driven game. But let's look at games where Alabama was awesome. They went up to Camp Randall and beat Wisconsin 42-10. Jalen Milroe throwing the ball, 12 of 17 for 196, 3 touchdowns, no picks. 14 carries, 75 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was awesome. They blew out Wisconsin. Against Georgia, of course, that was the big one. 27 of 33. Only 6 balls hit the ground. 374. 2 touchdowns, a pick. He ran 16 times for 117 yards. That averaged 7.3 yards per carry and 2 touchdowns. You look at Missouri, their 34-0 win. Not great. 16 of 26 for 215. He ran 11 times for 50 yards and a score, a long of 32. Good enough. Let's look at where they were bad. South Florida game. That was a game that you might remember was a 5-point game with about 4 or 5 minutes to go. And Alabama ended up scoring 21 points in the final 5 minutes of that game. Milroe, 16 of 26 for 194. He ran 12 times for 2 yards. Talk about Vanderbilt. 18 of 24 passing for 310. Touchdown and a pick. Ran 7 times for 10 yards. Tennessee, 25 of 45. 25 of 45 for 239. A touchdown, 2 picks. He ran 14 times for 11 yards. Y'all, this ain't tricky at all. Alabama goes as Jalen Milroe's competency goes. And that's really tough because Kalen DeBoer wants Jalen Milroe to be Michael Penix, but he ain't Michael Penix. If LSU can make Jalen Milroe throw the ball 45 times, they're going to win the game and win it easily. So running quarterback was one piece of it. The other, of course, was special teams, where LSU misfired on 3 field goals. 2 were misses. One was the snap that went off of the holder's head and never even got the kick off. So have they fixed it?
Based upon the number of snaps that they have where they have been so good, we took it as an anomaly, but that doesn't erase the fact that we didn't execute when we needed to. So we looked at everything from communication to the operation, who was operating, how we were operating, all of those things, and examined it closely and went back to work. And we've had a really good week, and our expectations are that we're going to be back to the consistent operations that we've had in the past.
Remind you that again, it's so weird, the stark contrast. Against Arkansas, Damian Ramos was the conference special teams player of the week, and the LSU run defense limited Arkansas with Taylon Green and Jaquindon Jackson to 38 rushing yards. 1 week later, in College Station, you misfire on 3 field goal attempts, and you look like you've never seen a running quarterback in your life. It's a word we use often here. Great teams find consistency. LSU hasn't found it yet. They're not great. But when they're consistent, they're really, really good. And if they're consistent and good on Saturday, it should be plenty good enough. One more big storyline from the last time LSU went out was Chris Hilton. It's interesting. The Tigers are 6-2. They've played 8 games, and for 8 weeks, we talked about Chris Hilton, his injury, when he was coming back, what he might deliver. He did deliver 2 catches for LSU, but boy, there were 2 other opportunities where he was open. He sort of mistimed a jump on a deep ball. But what it shows is Nussmeier's willing to go to Chris Hilton, and Chris Hilton can absolutely stretch a defense, which is exactly the thing we've been waiting for all year. And Brian Kelly was asked if Chris Hilton might have an increased role here in this game against Alabama.
I think it's unfair to put a guy in a position of significance after nearly 7-8 weeks, 2 months off. He's worked really hard. I felt him earlier in the week pressing a little bit, wanting to be, doing a little bit too much. And I told him, I said, listen, just let this game come to you, because when it does, he will have a significant impact. So I think it's just timing. It'll happen when it happens, but I think we're putting a little bit too much on him to have that significant impact in the game. He will play, and we expect him to help us win.
I think you saw it. You could see how fast, how fluid, how sudden, how explosive Chris Hilton is. If you were actually watching that game against Texas A&M, a couple of times he had opportunities where he mistimed a jump on a deep pass. Some of that's just timing and getting it back in rhythm after effectively, you heard Brian Kelly saying it, take 8 weeks off. But it's going to be an opportunity for Chris Hilton, I think, on Saturday night, his first game in Tiger Stadium this year. A little more health, a little more comfort, a little more timing. I think Chris Hilton's going to have a really nice day. I've shared this with you before, but former LSU great, all SEC receiver, first-round pick Eddie Kennison told me that, when I asked him about all the receivers replacing replacing Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, the one he said above all of them was Chris Hilton. And if we ever see healthy, peak Chris Hilton, he's every bit the receiver those other guys I just mentioned is. Got to see him healthy, got to see him go. Great time for it to happen will be this weekend with Alabama coming in. All right, it is Locked on LSU, your team every day. We had to Tuscaloosa to visit with our buddy Pat Smith from WJOX, actually in Birmingham. What does Alabama need to have happen to beat LSU? You'll hear it from the other side in just a second. It's Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby. It's not just football. It's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through those all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created Stan the Fan 5-Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called FanDuel. The energy shot was made just for super fans like us. The fans who are first in the parking lot, who are last to leave. We see you. Also, this weekend, LSU-Alabama, you want to be lit for that final play, the huge play at the end of the game for LSU and Alabama. Make sure you got plenty of 5-Hour Energy. And 5-Hour Energy knows no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you are preparing for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stan the Fan 5-Hour Energy Shot is here to help you keep fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whether and whatever it is, do it with a 5-Hour Energy. Available at 5hourenergy.com. Shop nationwide. So, Kalen DeBoer is preparing to play in Baton Rouge for the first time. So far, 2 road conference games. Alabama 0-2 in those road conference games. One big difference here, of course, is the historical success that Alabama has had in Baton Rouge. It was 30 years that LSU couldn't beat Alabama in Tiger Stadium from 1969 until they finally broke that curse in 2000. Tigers would have a little bit of success, but by and large in the Saban era, it was hard for LSU to beat Alabama no matter where they played. So I asked Pat Smith of WJOX in Birmingham. He's one of the co-creators of the Feinbaum Show, now one of the co-hosts of Three Man Front on Jocks FM in Birmingham. What does Alabama need to do to leave Tiger Stadium Saturday with a win?
I think it'll be third downs. I really do. Bama has had a huge problem this year, Matt, just huge problem getting off the field when they needed to get off the field. And seeing what Nussmeier did against Ole Miss and against Pete Gold in that defense, that scares the heck out of Alabama because they just have not been able to get off the field on third down when it really mattered. Yeah, they shut out Tennessee in the first half, just like everybody else has lately there against the Vols. But in the second half, when they had to have those third down stops, they just did not get it. And that comes back to if it's a short third down situation, can LSU have a running game to run between the tackles that teams have had success? And if Nussmeier gets hot, like he did on those final drives and then overtime against Ole Miss, then all of a sudden that is going to be very problematic for Alabama.
You know what's interesting about what Pat said there? When I said, what does Bama need to do to have success to win? And he said, well, it's got to be third down. And that third down has been problematic for that defense. Alabama's third down defense is 18th in America. Teams convert 31% against Alabama defensively on third down. Alabama is not just good, they're elite on third down defense. Have been this year. But Pat said Bama hasn't been able to get off the field when they had to. And that's why circumstances matter. You can look at stats, and stats don't always tell the whole story. Alabama's the 18th best team in the country at getting off the field on third down. But pretty dramatic whenever you hold Western Kentucky or Missouri with its backup quarterback, when you hold them down on third down. Western Kentucky was 3 of 18 on third down against Alabama. I mean, I can go through the list. South Florida on third down against Alabama was 2 of 18. You wonder why Bama's stats look so good on third down? They suffocated bad teams on third down. And by the way, after they play LSU, they're going to play Mercer, and that's only going to further help the stat sheet. Missouri, without Brady Cook, 3 of 13 on third down. Yeah, that skews things a bit. Let's look at the games they lost. Against Vanderbilt, Alabama's third down defense, Vandy converted 12 out of 18 third downs. I ain't good at math, y'all, but that's 2/3. That's 66%. Vanderbilt converted 66% on third down. They kept drives alive, and that's why Vanderbilt possessed the ball for 40 minutes against Alabama. Let's look at the other loss. Let's look at Tennessee. Tennessee, not as impressive, but 6 out of 14 on third down for 42%. When you are Alabama, and statistically you're 18th in the country on third down defense, and teams are converting just 31% against you, when you lose a game and you see Tennessee and Nico Iamaleava converted 6 out of 14 for 42%, 42% isn't something you're throwing a ticker tape parade for, but it is a heck of a lot better than the 31% Alabama has allowed on average this year. The point is, it's kind of like grading on a curve. Throw out the highest score and the lowest score, and you'll have a dramatically different result here with Alabama. You take out these low scores for Alabama on third down defense. You take out, Bama allowing Vanderbilt to go 12 of 18. Boy, it's going to look really good. But you take out the 2 of 16, maybe looks a little more like what the norm is. As for LSU on third down offensively, the Tigers converting nearly 50% on third down. LSU 10th in the country, converting 49.1% on third down. I think that is a very, very real observation by Pat Smith. And if you just think about that LSU Texas A&M game, one of the things we saw routinely was LSU throw on first down, by and large incomplete, leaving you 2nd and 10. Tigers would try to run to get the third manageable, did not have a lot of success running on 2nd and 10. And so you ended up behind the sticks with 3rd and long. And that's why a lot of drives, especially in the second half, ended the way they did. Not only by not scoring, but with turnovers, because you were behind the sticks and Nussmeier felt like he had to be Superman. So stay in 3rd and manageable, and LSU will move the ball and do just fine against this porous Alabama defense. Yes, you can look statistically at Alabama's defense. And statistically, there are things that look pretty good. This is a team that's allowing only 18 points per game. But I can look at a shutout against Missouri, a shutout against Western Kentucky, allowing just 16 points to South Florida, and that sure skews it. But this is also a team that blew a 28-point lead on its home field against Georgia, a team that allowed 40 to Vanderbilt, a team that has struggled to defend the pass and is statistically the worst run defense LSU will have faced to this point in the season. Y'all, LSU is going to move the football up and down the field. LSU is going to score a lot against Alabama. The only question is, can this LSU defense limit Alabama from scoring if the Tigers get a lead? Can they hold Alabama at arm's length? I have a thought on that, and I'll get to my prediction when we wrap up next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make more out of every moment with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Okay, time to get to some picks. I'll give you a media member's opinion, I'll give you a handicapper's opinion, and I'll give you my opinion. Of course, College Game Day is in Baton Rouge this weekend. Stanford Steve, as he is well known to college football fans from College Game Day and Sports Center with SVP. Had Stanford Steve on my radio show after further review on Thursday in town, was just about to head out to LSU's practice on Thursday. And here was Stanford Steve's pick. You get it exclusively here. Well, I guess on After Further Review on my radio show, but you get it here as well on Locked on LSU before you even have to wait until College Game Day on Saturday.
I got LSU.
Yeah, that's my guy. I tell you what.
And you touched on the things. I trust the idea of LSU in those situations more than what I've seen Jalen Milroe do on the road, and that's where LSU's got to do their thing. Would like to see. I think everybody would like to see a little more balance in the offense, but quarterback taking care of the football is the highest priority. It's got to be the highest priority. In talking to BK in years past and how he values, not giving the other team the ball, that's crucial. And when these two teams have lost this year, that's been the issue is multiple interceptions, and you can't do that when you know what you have at stake in this game.
Stanford Steve likes LSU in this football game. What about professional handicapper Lee Sterling?
I think it's an elimination game. You have 3 losses, you're probably out. It was an instant classic 2 years ago. LSU is really good at home. 13 straight games at night. I think Kalen DeVere, I just really don't think he fully understood what he was getting into. Having been in the Pac-12, the only real tough road game was probably Oregon. Now he's been at Tennessee, and I thought his team looked like a deer in headlights for most of the game. Now they're without Cole Adams. They're playing in a tougher place for this game. Unless Jalen Milroe is really on the money. We know what he does running, but throwing the football, seems like more times than not this year he hasn't been. I like LSU here. Wrong team favored. LSU 28-24.
Stanford Steve likes LSU. Lee Sterling likes LSU. And Matt Moscona likes LSU as well. I think you know by now that I'm not the guy that's going to pick LSU because I'm supposed to pick LSU. If I think they're going to win, I'm going to tell you. And if I think they're going to lose, I'm going to tell you. And I've referenced this a lot if you've been with the show. Back in SEC football media days in July, we do the whole thing where you get the schedule and you make your picks. And I'm a big, big, big believer. And not just who you play, but when and where you play them. So in the summer, I loved LSU against Ole Miss. A lot of people were hyping Ole Miss. Loved LSU against Ole Miss. Told you, look, Ole Miss playing back-to-back road conference games. LSU coming off a bye at home, probably a night game. Huge spot for LSU. Picked LSU. Angered a lot of LSU fans because I picked Texas A&M to beat LSU. Said the same thing. Tigers, 3 straight SEC games, back-to-back road conference games. A&M does play the week before, but it's a bye. Then they're at Mississippi State. It's going to be at Kyle Field, 108,000 people going bonkers. LSU, back-to-back road conference games. I liked A&M. Now, we got into those game weeks, and I flipped. I picked LSU to lose to Ole Miss and LSU to beat A&M. Should have gone with my initial prediction, which is what I'm going to do here. In the summer, I picked LSU to beat Alabama. My bold prediction was Alabama was going to go 9-3. I thought they would lose to Georgia, Tennessee, and LSU. Well, they beat Georgia, but they lost to Vanderbilt. Quite honestly, I would take that trade-off any day as an LSU fan. But the reason that I liked LSU against Alabama then and the reason I like LSU against Alabama now is exactly what we've seen. This is an Alabama football team that is flawed. Alabama is going to run out of that south end zone tunnel on Saturday night. And it's going to be the crimson jerseys. It'll be the numbers on the side of the helmet. They're going to play Yay Alabama. Their fans are going to scream Roll Tide. Big Al in the elephant costume is going to be there on the sideline. But it's just not the same. This is an Alabama team without Nick Saban. You're not facing Nick Saban anymore. You're facing Kalen DeBoer. Take the uniform away and let me ask you, if Brian Kelly was going against Kalen DeBoer, how would you feel? Probably pretty good. When you look at that LSU offense, which has been so good at times this year, especially Garrett Nussmeier, and I told you, hey, man, it's Garrett Nussmeier and Kyron Lacey and CJ Daniels and Mason Taylor and Caden Durham and all those offensive players, Aaron Anderson, Xavion Thomas, against Kane Womack. Sounds and feels a lot different than against Nick Saban, doesn't it? The reality is, Alabama turned over roughly half of its roster from a year ago. Not all in the portal, but you had guys graduate. You had guys leave early for the draft. You had guys leave in the transfer portal. But roughly half of their roster turned over year to year. And the thing I told you in the summer is the same thing I'm going to tell you right now. You don't lose the greatest coach of all time and turn over half of your roster in one season and not miss a beat. Just not realistic. And that's why you've seen Alabama as shaky as they have been this year. Not Nick Saban. It's Kalen DeBoer. Whenever there's a coin flip game, and I certainly think Alabama is plenty capable of winning this game. While I have yelled and done the Bama is burning thing and had a lot of fun doing the theatrical nature of it all, the thing that I have consistently said throughout is, I'm not telling you Alabama's going to be bad. I'm just telling you they're not going to be the greatest ever anymore. And I think that's true. Nick Saban's not losing to Vanderbilt. Nick Saban's team's not committing 15 penalties and losing at that Tennessee team where Nico Iamaleava couldn't complete a forward pass. But when you look at this LSU team against that Alabama team, it's hard to imagine Alabama defensively coming up with enough stops against LSU. And yes, I know LSU defensively has had their issues, certainly a year ago and at times this year. But I've also seen that defense be plenty good enough. And if you give Blake Baker 2 weeks to prepare, 2 weeks to drill those guys into how to do it right, I think he's going to get it right. And there's no threat of a backup quarterback coming into the game that you didn't prepare for. I picked LSU to beat Alabama in the offseason, and the only way I would have come off that is if through these 8 games I had seen something that would have dissuaded me. Well, losing to Vanderbilt, losing to Tennessee, needing to survive an onside kick against South Florida, an onside kick against South Carolina, being in a 1-score game with South Florida more than halfway through the fourth quarter. I haven't seen anything from this Alabama team that tells me they're dramatically better than what I thought they were going to be coming into this year. So, I like LSU. Brian Kelly has never lost a night game in Tiger Stadium. Tigers have won the last 13 night games in Tiger Stadium, and Brian Kelly 16-2 in his last 18 when coming off a bye. Bottom line is LSU's got the better coach. They got the better quarterback, and they're at home in what is going to be an absolutely lit Tiger Stadium. I think it's a close game, but I think LSU gets a late touchdown and wins it 34-27. Give me the Tigers to eliminate Bama from playoff contention and to keep their own playoff hopes alive. Okay, that'll do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On LSU. If you're new, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. And remember, the best way to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So please drop your comments here on Locked On LSU. Okay, that'll do it for us here on this edition of Locked On LSU. Remember, please tell a friend if they love the Tigers. We got you here for Locked On LSU, your team every day.